Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace, here with Rocky from Comic Boom. I thought since we covered the first two books of Scott Tober, why not talk about the third? So we're here today to talk to you about the third Comixology original from Scott Snyder, this time collaborating with Francesco Francavilla on a project that Scott and Francesco have been actually talking about for quite a few years now. I think I saw Scott say in an interview, or maybe it was in his newsletter, this is actually the property or the story that's been in production for the longest, or been planned for the longest. So I've been working on this for quite a while, and I thought it was pretty solid. Again, totally different feel from Clear, which in turn is a totally different feel from We Have Demons. But I thought it was really, really good. I'm not a big horror fan, as longtime listeners of the podcast will remember. So this one probably didn't hit my sweet spot quite as well as We Have Demons and Clear did, but I still thought it was very, very good. What did you think, Rocky?
I liked it. I'm not generally into horrors for comic books myself, but that's actually changed. And I credit DC Comics. The Black Label has gotten me with the Joe Hill line of comics from DC has really gotten me into horror in the last year or so. Particularly, my favorite was Basket Full of Heads, and of course, Refrigerator Full of Heads just came out this past week in DC. I'm enjoying that, and of course, I mean, look. Scott Snyder, man, he's excellent with horror. I'm not always a big fan of horror in the mainstream DC universe, and Snyder had a horror element to DC, but he's in his wheelhouse here. And man, I mean, with this particular issue, while it may not be my favorite of what he's put out so far, of the three so far, I'm still really enjoying this. So I have a feeling it's going to be at least a trifecta. And of course, he's putting out another one next week. So I'm looking forward to, hey man, we might as well go for all four. Let's review all of them.
Well, I think next week actually it's not a whole series. I think it's a preview of what else is to come.
Oh, okay.
I think is what's coming. I think there's just three first issues in Scott Tober, as Comixology is calling it. But yeah, I mean there are four more titles to come, so I'm anxiously awaiting them. I just don't know how far along they are on those. So just to remind everybody, the creators here: writer Scott Snyder, art and colors by Francesco Francavilla, letters by Andworld Design, edited by Will Dennis. And again, it's a fascinating story. And we talked a little bit, or I specifically talked a lot, I guess, in the first two stories about kind of mashing up two different ideas, right? Like the whole thing in We Have Demons, in my mind, the thing that intrigued me the most was the fact that it was sort of religion slash faith mashed up with science, with this idea of the lightest element and the heaviest element and evolution, and how those elements were tied into sort of good and evil in Earth, or on Earth, as life evolved. I found that to be fascinating. In Clear, we're talking about really traditional crime noir with sort of a cynical, hard-boiled detective, investigating his ex-wife's murder, mashed up with this idea of technology and how it isolates us, and in the far future, how you can skin reality to look like whatever you want. So really taking something from the past, this idea of a noir detective story, and mashing it up with something futuristic that we don't even have quite yet. The technology to use AR, augmented reality, to make the world look like what you want to look like. So I went into this one wondering, okay, well, are we going to see multiple things mashed up again? Is that something Scott's doing on purpose? Is it just the fact that these are creator-owned books and he gets a chance to sort of, there's no limitations, right? Like the training wheels are off. He can do whatever he wants. He owns these properties. You don't have to worry about, protecting some IP for this multi-billion-dollar corporation. Do whatever you want. Like, that's not the case if you're writing Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman or whoever, right? I mean, you're just a caretaker of that character, as opposed to these. Sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. He owns the properties. So is that something that we're going to see? And in a way, yes, but not so overt in the story, I feel like. Certainly it's a horror story. We've said that. This idea of telling a story in present time as we're reading this. I'll let Rocky do kind of the recap in a second. It'll make more sense what I'm saying. But this idea of this horror film fan who's apparently his job is to like restore old celluloid films, old films from the early 20th century. Um, so there's that story happening in kind of the present time, but then there's also flashbacks to the actual film that he found called Night of the Ghouls that's central to the story. So in that way, you're having two different stories because you're actually having the story that's happening in present time as it unfolds, but flashbacks to the story that would have been the film Night of the Ghoul. But then also this idea of the relationship between father and son, which is I found to be very fascinating, and I can't wait to talk to Scott about it and ask him how his own relationship with his sons kind of played into the relationship between this father and son because it's it's so interesting. And being a father myself, I saw some similarities with the way my son and I interact and whatnot. So I wouldn't say there's like two different ideas that are really interesting and a lot of times diametrically opposed because that was the thing about the first two stories, right? You had this idea of religion or faith, which oftentimes is uh, completely on the other side of the spectrum from science. Like science can't explain God or any of that sort of thing. So sometimes those ideas can be at odds with each other. And then in Clear, you're talking about a story, like I said, of the past with this hard-boiled detective that's juxtaposed against this idea of technology and being able to skin the world and see how you want. Again, those are ideas that are separated. They're on either end of the spectrum, the past, the future. So we're getting sort of multiple ideas here, but they're not necessarily ideas that are opposed to each other. They're just sort of, I would almost say, separate story threads or separate plot points or story beats, however you want to look at it. Um, but it still makes for a very intricate and compelling story, and it pulled me right in. Like I said, I just loved the interaction between father and son, like the syntax, the vocabulary, just the way they interacted with each other. It wasn't over the top, laugh out loud funny, but it was just so authentic. And again, it just reminded me of my relationship with my son. So I thought that was fantastic. Then you have the story that takes place in the film, and then you have the story that's taking place where it seems like this what is his name, T.F. Merritt, who supposedly was the greatest writer or director who was planning on releasing this film Night of the Ghoul, and what exactly is that going to mean? Um, so this Mister Inman, who's gone there, who's the film fan who's gone to see Merritt in this hospital. Um, it's clear by the end of this first issue already that he's bitten off more than he can chew by pursuing this Night of the Ghoul story. So, and I'll let you recap it further than that if you want, Rocky.
Well, there's a there's a what I love about recapping this is, I mean, there's a lot of substance in this opening issue. That's what I really like. And not only is there substance, but the mood and the ambiance by artist Francesco Francavilla. Wow, this is he does a really good job creating the mood and the tone of this opening issue. This is about Ghoul, the Night of the Ghoul. And what is a Ghoul? Well, Scott Snyder explained it, but it's explained here that the Night of the Ghoul is more than just a movie that was made by this director T.F. Merritt, who this father and his young son are visiting in this nursing home, and ostensibly because his name has been changed, and apparently this young father, this Forrest, that takes his son Orson looking for this old director and writer T.F. Merritt, because he's a great writer and director of this Night of the Ghoul, this horror film that was made in the mid 1940s, but was ultimately gone missing and destroyed. But this Forrest character and his son, they managed to find this pieces of the old film. And he's just got a lot of questions about it because he thinks that it's the greatest horror film of all time, and he wants to interview this director, this T.F. Merritt. And this Merritt character looks horrific. He looks like his face has been burned. He looks really horrific, and there's something really eerie about this nursing home. And there's great rapport, as you alluded to earlier, about between Forrest and his son Orson. Even when they're approaching the nursing home, I mean, Orson is joking around, "Yay, we finally found a nursing home. We found where the old people live." And I mean, the dialogue and the rapport between father and son here is quite it's quite good. And what's interesting is that it isn't just the horror element that's taking place here. What's also taking place is there are secrets between father and son that are alluded to that we're going to be getting to presumably in future issues. And in particular, there's something that Orson and his mom know that they're keeping from their dad. And Orson himself doesn't even really want to be there. Orson wants to live with his mom, doesn't want to live with his dad. And there are some things that his dad doesn't know, but you can tell he loves his dad. He just doesn't want to live with him. But those are the things that are going on behind the scenes. Meanwhile, I thought it was quite interesting that Forrest is almost like awestruck. He finally found this director, this T.F. Merritt. And despite the horrid looking appearance of this director, he wants to ask him all these questions. And when this T.F. Merritt, he's actually in the nursing home under a different name. When he finds out why he's, because this Forrest lied, pretended to be an insurance broker, pretended to be an insurance agent just to get a meeting with this guy, this director. And when the director finds out, he's horrified. He finds out you got this film because, oh my God, you saw Night of the Ghoul. How much of it have you seen? And Francesco Francavilla does a great job of showing the eyes of the director as he sees. Oh my God, you watched it? Oh no. And meanwhile, I thought it was hilarious that even the nursing staff is they're kind of warning Forrest and Orson. You gotta, by the way, you gotta warn this old guy. He's crazy, he talks, and beware, because when he has moments of clarity, he's even more scary than when he's delusional. I mean, there's humor here as well. And like you said, the flashbacks showing bits and pieces of the movie, because you got to wonder what's so special about this movie. And the movie takes place in World War One, and with World War One soldiers approaching a place called Culla in Italy, and Culla means cradle, and it's about these three World War One soldiers named Kurt, Johnny, and Bookings, where they go and they check out this town, but the town is completely abandoned. And this town is completely abandoned, and even the German soldiers, because they're a U.S. they're a 332nd Army Brigade, and they're in there and they're expecting to find German troops, but they're not. All the German troops and the people of this town are dead, and it's very eerie. And as we're wondering what's so special about this movie, the conversation continues to take place between Forrest and Merritt. And Francavilla does a great job of showing the film strip burning, because they have pieces of it. So you get to parts of the narrative just when you're getting excited to know what's going to happen next in this movie, the film strip burns. And it sort of reminds me of of the Batman Superman comic that we reviewed with Jane Yuen Lang of Batman Superman, where he utilized the different film strips to go from multiverse to universe. And it's done to even great effect here by Francavilla. And it works really well, because you get a sense that, time is fragmented and even the director talks about, or when he's talking to Forrest is so impressed. He thinks it's a great movie. He loved how it's not just a horror movie, and it's about relationships and a father-son relationship, because one of the characters in the movie, Johnny, the young soldier Johnny, is talking about his son, or young Sergeant Kurt is talking about his son back home. And that father-son dynamic not only takes place in Night of the Ghouls, but it's taken place between Forrest and Orson. And of course, Merritt himself Merritt just basically tells him, Merritt just says, look, I thought it was quite comical. At one point, Merritt just says, well, you know what? You're dead anyway. You guys are dead anyway. Unfortunately, you and your son saw this movie. So at one point, Merritt just sort of resigns himself that we're going to be dead before the end of the night. You're going to be dead at the end of the night. Your son's going to be dead. This is a trap. You've gotten here. You've been lured into a trap. I've been kept here against my will. I've been prisoner since I made the movie, because and the Ghoul is going to be released. And oh my God, what's the Ghoul? And the Ghoul is the embodiment of all the monsters, all the other monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, all of them are just zombies. All of it originated with the Ghoul. Everything's connected to the Ghoul in some way. The Ghoul, real life horrific instances where the Ghoul partook in resulted in real life stories that became myth and became legend, such as Dracula, zombies, Frankenstein, werewolves, etc., etc. And but the Ghoul is real, where all the other monsters that we think are scary, it's nonsense. That's all fiction. What's real is the Ghoul. And Merritt just sort of resigns himself, saying, well, one of my favorite moments is where Merritt is basically just pours himself some scotch, and he asks Forrest just to toast him, because you might as well toast it. It's our last night. We're gonna die, and let me tell you my story in the making of Night of the Ghoul. And that's what's going to be this entire series, and I'm fascinated by it. I love it. The scenes, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Francavilla's scenes. There are scenes where his son Orson is talking to their mother, and in the background as he's talking to his mother, there's people in the nursing home. The residents are peeking out and peeking at him, and then he turns around and looks, and they completely disappear. So you get a cinematic, scary feeling, like, it's just like in a movie where you see an image, you turn around, you look, and then they're gone. And Francavilla does a really good job. I strongly recommend what Francavilla manages to do here so well, because it's Comixology. I recommend that people watch this with the guided view. When you go on Comixology, watch this with the guided view, because they just show you panel by panel instead of seeing the page. Let guided view guide you through this story, because it has a greater gravitas and a greater feeling when you allow the guided view of the Comixology narrative to sort of tell you this story from panel to panel. So the panel is only shown to you as you click on the guided view. It's a much more exciting and horrific and mood altering experience. And I really enjoyed it when I read it, when I allowed the guided view to take me on that journey. And I'm absolutely captivated by this. It ends with just that scary idea that, hey, toast me. Forrest puts on his phone to record the conversation, which is interesting, because I have a feeling that by recording this conversation of what the director's going to tell him, now there's not only going to be a movie telling the story of the Ghoul, but now there's going to be an iPhone recording of recording of the story of the Ghoul. And I think that's how I think it's the story of the Ghoul that slowly, as it leaks out, it gets more powerful, but that's just me speculating. I love this. The mooded colors, the flashbacks that are in a very sort of a sepatone. What's the anyways, the dull sort of light, sort of a darkish brown sort of background of when there's a flashback to World War I scenes.
Yeah,
It's
like
just
a sepia tone.
sepia. Thank you, sepia
Yeah.
tone. Yeah, so it's just very well done, and it ends on a cliffhanger, to be continued. And yeah, this is perfect for Halloween. Perfect for Halloween. I'd strongly recommend this. And and Francavilla, you couldn't get a better artist to convey that Halloween kind of feeling. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I love the fact that you called out the moment when T.F. Merritt realizes that Inman and his son Orson have watched this movie, right? Like,
yeah,
first he's like you said, he's the eyes, he's shocked. Wait, you tracked it down? Clearly, he mentions Inman mentions, well, yeah, his whole job is restoring film, and he's a huge horror fan, and he found this legendary supposed horror film that was supposed to come out many years ago, and they thought it was all lost, that it all burned up in the studio fire. And even the little hints like that, okay, well, was that studio fire set on purpose to destroy this film? Because clearly there's a lot more to the Ghoul is supposed to be the monster that sort of spawned all other monsters.
yeah,
What the Ghoul does and the way the Ghoul infects the human race. has given rise to the Mummy and Frankenstein and vampires and all these other monsters. And clearly that maybe there's a force at work, or something else that knew this was going on. This is why Merritt wasn't able to ever finish his film, and it was hidden. And we find out as the story goes on that he's been a prisoner, like you said, Rocky, ever since he tried to make this movie, because he's aware of the ghoul. But then from that intensity in his eyes and that intensity in his facial expression that Francavilla gives us so well, you turn the page, just a couple pages later, after Inman tells him, well, yeah, I watched it. I watched it all, and I showed it to my son. Then all of a sudden, that intensity melts away. It melts away from Merritt. He's like, well, yeah, well, you killed yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. And since you're gonna be dead anyway, I guess I might as well tell you what happened. And I mean, it's a great job from a visual standpoint of what Francavilla has given us, um, as well as from a narrative standpoint, from Scott Snyder's viewpoint of giving us a great example of what human nature is, right? Specifically, the panel where I think if you go back, or maybe, well, let me see which one. Yeah, if you go back a few pages, when Merritt takes the mask off his face, when he realizes that that Inman and his son have watched this film, and the guy's clearly a fan, and he calls it a masterpiece. Yeah, I think it's maybe the next page after that. Yeah, right after that film sequence, in the upper right corner, you'll see where Merritt takes his mask off and he says, "Oh, you thought it was a masterpiece, right?" Like yeah, that page there.
Yeah.
The look on his face there, right? Like at first he was genuinely concerned for this guy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, who have you shown it to? Almost like what was the classic early 2000s horror movie where you wouldn't The Ring, right? You didn't want to show anybody The Ring because if they saw it, they would get killed by the chick from the well.
Yeah.
And so that's Merritt at first. Like, oh, who did you show it to? You've put them in mortal danger. Once he realizes this guy's seen it and he's already dead, then it's like, whoa, I'll let him stroke my ego then. There's a part of him that, despite, all the horrific stuff that's happened to him apparently, but there's still a part of him that's that writer director that probably laments the fact he never became famous. He never got the adulation he deserved for creating the greatest horror film ever. And if this guy's going to be dead anyway, here's finally a fan. Here's finally somebody who he can talk to about it, right?
Yeah.
He can hear fan reaction to his masterpiece, what he literally gave his life to. This idea of the Night of the Ghoul, and the fact that he never got the recognition he deserves. So it's little things like that enrich these characters and make the story so much greater than the sum of its parts. So yeah, I love that intensity of his reaction at first. Like, he's worried for this guy that he may have watched the film, but then when he realizes he's going to die anyway, he's just like, all right, well, yeah, let's have some drinks and talk about it. You want to record it? Go ahead. You're never leaving here alive anyway. The ghoul will come and kill us all, he says, right? He says, yeah, toast with me and I'll tell you my story, and then the ghoul's going to come and we're all dead. So,
well, it's like I said to you, if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but it's like even by us watching the movie as we're reading it we're reading the movie on the page, we also become doomed. And so that's why I said, I almost decided to pour some whiskey and review this while sipping whiskey and toasting Merritt, because, hey man, if we're watching the movie too, all of us who read this comic are going to die too. So, it's like, so it's breaking that fourth wall again. And so it's really good that way. So it's actually quite entertaining if you let yourself get into it. And again, I recommend that read this digitally through a guided view experience. It's much more enticing.
Yeah, you don't get things, I won't say spoiled, but yeah, it unfolds a little at a little slower pace, and yeah, it ends up being a really unique experience. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some tropes here, right? I mean, we are talking about um, an idea of a horror story and really a secret, right? The whole idea of the ghoul, uh, it's a secret. When Inman holds up kind of the postcard or the flyer for the movie, it says Night of the Ghoul, directed by T.F. Merritt. When it comes, nothing can stop it. Um, and so, there are some sort of classic tropes. A father and a son being trapped somewhere, and being surrounded, and uh, impending doom, I guess we'll call it, is coming, whether that's in the sense of a disaster coming, or zombies, or in this case, the ghoul. Um, but what keeps it fresh is the little details that we've talked about here, the interaction between Inman and Orson, uh, the the great reactions and sort of knowledge of T.F. Merritt and his resignation once he realizes what's about to happen, and then the foreshadowing, the secrets, like Rocky was saying. Not only are there secrets to do with um, this convalescent home, this old folks home, in terms of what's really going on there and why have they kept Merritt a prisoner all this time, but what are the secrets that Orson and the mother know that the father doesn't know, and how might that affect anything? And are we gonna? It wouldn't surprise me to find out that Inman and his son Orson are in some way related to T.F. Merritt, or part of some lineage that uh, has to do with the ghoul, going back a number of years. I mean, who knows? There's so much here to mine, and I do sort of feel like, and tell me if you think so as well, Rocky, uh, because these are bigger panels than we got in the last couple Scott Tober issues, which is fine because I think you need that for Francavilla's style of art in order to set the tone and mood, which I agree with you. He was the perfect choice for this. I don't
Yeah.
particularly think that his style suits superhero stuff. He doesn't do a lot of superhero stuff, but his stuff is much more suited to horror. It's just where his proclivities lie, and I think where his art works best.
Yes.
Um, but because of the larger panels in this, and setting the kind of the mood with the burnt edges of film and whatnot, I do feel like this was a little bit faster paced. We got fewer panels, so in turn we got a little bit less story than we got in the first two releases, which I'm not complaining like whatsoever, right? Like again, if you're not familiar with how you can get these books, we'll talk about that at the end. But I'm not paying any extra because I have Amazon Prime, so it's not like I'm complaining I didn't get more value. But I do feel like there's a little bit less story here just because of the bigger panels and a little bit faster paced. But again, so compelling, like with all three of these releases from Snyder and his fellow collaborators, every single time I got to the last page, I immediately wanted the next issue. I wanted more. So they're all compelling and they all pulled me in. But I do feel like, in terms of the amount of story, that this one might be a little bit less. It's not significant, and I'm not saying that it wasn't enough story, because I think it's a very good first issue and a very good beginning to the story to hook you. But it's just something that I noticed, as opposed to on Clear and We Have Demons. As I was scrolling through digitally, I'm like, oh, I'm not done yet. There's still more. There's still more. With this one, before I knew it, I was on the last page, and I was like, oh, I want the next one. Did you find that to be the case? It
Uh,
felt like a little bit of a quicker read.
uh, well, I agree with you. But I never noticed it. I never noticed it quite as much as you did. Only because I do think Clear and We Are Demons required more exposition, simply because it was setting up a new mythology.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
makes sense.
and so it was new. It was more world building with the world of Clear and We Are Demons, and so it required a lot more exposition. And whereas this is more of a straight up horror tale. This is more embracing some of the tropes of a classic horror story, while adding some interesting elements in his own right, and having fun with it. Having fun with it. I mean, it's funny how, we when we review comics, we try to find what are the hidden themes, and we talk. It's interesting here that we talk about, well, there's a father son dynamic in this story between Forrest and Orson, and between Sergeant, the one of the Sergeant Kenny there, of one of the soldiers, has a son back home in World War I. In the movie itself, it's funny that when Forrest talks to the director, that Merritt, about it, Merritt says, he Forrest even says, "Oh, I love the themes in your movie," and Forrest and Merritt even says, "No, there's only the ghoul. Like there's no theme. No, there's only the ghoul in the movie." It's like no, this is so. It's I mean, literally, it's Merritt himself, the director of the movie, is basically saying, "No, it is only the ghoul. If you see anything else in the movie, you've missed it. The ghoul is one. He's deceived you. I mean, suggesting that it's the ghoul. It's evil. That's how it sucks you in. I've been a prisoner here in this nursing home for so long. You've been lured here through somehow, and it's a trap. And it's like I said, just classic, just straight up classic. And I think one thing that can slow this read down, that might make it more enjoyable, I say again, man, that guided view. I took my time reading this because I let the guided view take me that slow transition from panel to panel. It's perfect for a horror comic like this. Really is.
Yeah, I agree. And again, you do have to take your time because there is a lot in the details, and we've talked a lot about that specifically when we're talking about the expression from T.F. Merritt and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I highly recommend this as well as the previous titles. Just a reminder, the way you can get the book. So if you're an Amazon Prime member like myself, you just go to Amazon, do a search for, you know, uh, Night of the Ghoul Comicsology, and it'll pop up, and you can put it in your cart. It costs $0, and then you can read it in a browser on it's Kindle Cloud Reader. It's called. You just read it right there on your computer screen. Or if you have the subscription to Comicsology Unlimited, which gets you access not only to all the Comicsology originals, the ones by Scott Snyder, the ones by Jeff Lemire, the ones by Jock, the ones by Mark Bernardin. Like you get all of that. Plus, there's like 40,000 other books in that library that you can get. There's Marvel stuff, there's DC, there's Image, there's tons of other titles that you get for that subscription of $8.99 a month, which is cheaper than two of these books if you buy them individually, which you still can do. You still can go to Amazon, type, We Have Demons Comicsology. You can buy the first issue. It's $4.99 for each of these first issues, so it's $5. But again, for less than the price of two of them would be $10, less than the price of two for $8.99, you can get not only access to all of Scott's first issues that have come out this month, but all the other Comicsology originals and all the other Comicsology library that's out there. So that's really your best value, unless you're already an Amazon Prime member, in which case you get all of Scott's Comicsology originals plus all the other Comicsology originals. But what you don't get access to is the other 40,000 or so books in the library that are basically digital releases of print comics that come out the same day as the print. So, Marvel and DC and all that sort of stuff. So it's a great value. Again, subscription is probably the way to go, or Amazon Prime membership. I think these are fantastic. What I love about it is I can tell how much fun Scott is having along with his collaborators. It reminds me of his early days at DC, and I don't want to like poo poo on any of his more recent work, but it as his tenure at DC got longer, the thing that I sensed, the trend that I sensed in Scott's work was oftentimes I could tell that the ideas behind the stories were huge, right? They were huge in scope, but just because of sort of the state of the industry and the limitations in terms of how many pages and what's going to be sold and production time and all that sort of thing, that I felt like a lot of times his stories got choppy, or there were things that he had to cut out that were left on the kind of the cutting room floor, so to speak, to borrow a film term. We're talking about Night of the Ghoul film. Um, but there are so many things in metal and death metal where I felt like, man, if if there was an unlimited amount of pages and an unlimited budget and unlimited time to produce this, the story would be gigantic, right? There'd be so much more. It would feel like a richer experience. Um, and so I didn't think that the stories fulfilled the potential of the ideas that Scott had. I don't feel that way with these. Maybe it's because he's building these worlds and these stories from the ground up, and there's nothing else that he's pulling from. Like, we're learning the stuff as it's unfolding right before us. And so it just has such a different feel. Again, I think the passion and the joy that he has in creating these stories with his co-creators comes through. And they're fantastic. Like, I was looking for it. Like, as soon as Scott announced it, I was obviously looking forward to this stuff, especially based on the fact of how good Noctera was, because I got that same feeling that he was having so much fun doing it. Um, but then as soon as he announced these Comixology books, I was like, okay, I definitely have to check those out. And every single one of them has exceeded my expectations. So I definitely recommend checking them out. Again, we've told you how to get them, and they're fantastic. I can't really recommend them highly enough. So, any final thoughts, Rocky?
Just thank you, Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla. This is a great. I think this is the most pure Halloween flavored story so far, rivaling Clear and We Are Demons in terms of a good Halloween, a Halloween read for Halloween. Just to me, this is just. And I do have a bias. I love Francisco Francavilla. I've loved him. I really got to know his work back. He did a lot of Dynamite covers for the Lone Ranger, and he draws westerns great, like western imagery and horses and cowboys and classic gunfighting scenes. He's really good at it, and I just I've loved his art since then, and this is absolutely in his wheelhouse. Snyder's in his wheelhouse, man. Snyder can go as dark as he wants. I was less of a fan of it when he was at DC and things got a little dark, even with death metal. But I mean, let's face it, he's good at it. And man, when something isn't broke and you're good at something, why? There's nothing to fix. I mean, just I'm in this, 3 for 3 so far. So I'm quite impressed with Snyder.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely 3 for 3. So go and check it out. Be sure you reach out on social media. Let us know what you think. Don't forget, if you're listening to us audio only on the podcast, that we did put this up on our YouTube channel. You can go and check that out. While you're over at YouTube, be sure you head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Boom with an exclamation point. Subscribe to his channel. Ring that notification bell so you know when he has new content coming out. If you are checking us out on YouTube, don't forget that we have the audio only episodes that come out. Hopefully, we'll get back to a daily, or at least more than 3 or 4 episodes a week soon. So be sure you just subscribe on whatever podcast app is your app of choice. We're on all of them. So we appreciate the support as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.